However, if you accept sensuality as the equivalent counterpart of theory, you can regard creativity and free will in the twilight of sensual experience and theoretical denying, as I explain in my book of the same title. Free will and creativity have their origin in motives that are deeply rooted in mankind. They are striving for self-confidence and self-realization. Self-confidence is won by the splitting into reason and sensuality. Self-realization by bringing intentions into existence in the form of ideas or, if possible, real beings. It is easily understood that self-realization has self-confidence as a basis. You have to be as self in order to realize yourself. Myths, fairy tales, and religions have self-confidence and self-realization as a central subject, and scientific axioms and faiths have their roots already in myths and religions, as I try to explain in my book, Philosophy of Religion of the Natural Sciences. Though generally unaware of the process, the scientists had developed from thinker to actor. Knowledge is only accepted if theoretical hypotheses are verified by sensual experiences. Moreover, the scientist was dependent on the technician of the experimental plans, the experiments, and the realization of the hypothesis. What the essence of sensual experience and what technique are has not been subject to scientific research. Even the definition of thinking is only of interest if it can be observed in the form of neural reactions. Regarding this changed attitude, the philosophical question of what is oneself cannot be answered by stating that thinking and existing are the same anymore. The increasing will-determined thinking made the acting man the origin of all philosophy. Philosophy more and more became a formulation of what man is, in the sense of the remark by Fichte, "Tell me your philosophy and I will tell you what kind of person you are." The philosophical turn to found all thinking and acting on the self-responsible individual was made by Kant, in a way completed by Fichte. But only intellectual thinking, willing and feeling was in the focus. Sensuality was pressed in Procrustes' bed of the scheme of the power of imagination, and the general ideas of goodness and beauty became regulative ideas which were no longer justified by mythic and religious norms, but nevertheless were regarded as having their justification in themselves. Hegel separated thinking man from acting man. For him, philosophy only starts post festum, when a form of life has become old, and man is learning to walk on his head. By making ideas dynamic, he integrated the process of life into his systematic thinking. After Hegel, philosophers postulated the will of man that Hegel had brought to a standstill to be the main motivation of men. Marx propagated that the Hegel, who was standing on his head, should again be stood on his feet. Hegel's perfect philosophy should become praxis and make the social conditions perfect too. With Marx, somehow, the philosophy of action was born. However, Marxism tried to be an objective science and regarded the individual only as a specimen of mankind. Other philosophers only emphasize certain aspects of acting, so Schopenhauer and Nietzsche stressed the will, or the existentialist, the solitary individual standing on his own. In the tradition, especially of Descartes and Kant, Husserl focused all thinking and acting on intentions. Thus Husserl proved to be a philosopher of action, as I tried to demonstrate in my dissertation of 1964, the relation of theory and praxis in the transcendental phenomenology of Edmund Husserl, which was reprinted in 2007 with an annex, Husserl as Philosopher of Action. The followers of Husserl, I am thinking especially of Heidegger and Gadamer, turned his intentional analysis into a fundamental ontology. They put the language at the place of Hegel's processing ideas, in a way sensually enriched. The human subject became a moment of the language, which became the main subject with Heidegger and Gadamer, but as well with the theorists of language, the theorists of discourses, Foucault, and theorists of systems, as Luhmann. For them it was man that was speaking, but the language itself. I discuss these positions in the book Language as Object of Science, Philosophical Phenomenon and Deed. From the standpoint of an actor, it is the view of the first person. You see the world and what the actor is intending. The being of the actor himself only gets the focus when you look at his genealogy. What man as an acting being is was described by Max Scheler, Helmut Plessner and Arnold Gehlen. I value that in the book Anthropology and Philosophy of Action, which is still unpublished. Philosophy of action is more than Habermas' philosophy of communicative action, where action is only the exchange of claims or values which are based on norms already developed. There's only little relation to the variety of concrete actions, which should lose their dynamic and creativity if they were dependent on general approval only. As every being is related to an actor, philosophy of action must be able to explain all principles of how to be. Especially it must explain the development of man from his birth to his death and analyze possible psychological deficits, as I try to do in the not yet printed book Philosophy of Psychology, Psychological Genealogy and Psychotherapy. Traditional philosophical thinking is learned from old men, but the future is shaped by the youth. Therefore, you better learn from young people what is new. In this sense, I have to thank my granddaughter Paulina Rita Martinez Moreno, who gave the advice to this presentation and made the film. I am also obliged to my daughter-in-law, Verena Jenicke, for checking through the English text. Thank you for your attention.
Gut.
Schluss.
Ja.